leadership is helping other people succeed, regardless of if you're succeeding or not. And so I firmly believe anybody can be a leader. You do not have to have a title to be a leader. And I do want people that are listening to, again, really think about the fact that if you have leadership written on your org chart, you might want to double check that because some of your employees, especially if they're listening to this podcast, they're laughing at you.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Train Like You Listen, a podcast about all things learning and development in bite-sized chunks. I'm Brian Washburn. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Endurance Learning, and we are an instructional design shop that can help you put together all kinds of training programs from classroom to instructor-led to e-learning. But enough about me. I'm joined today by the HR lady, Wendy Sellers, who has a podcast called The HR Lady, and who's also written a book entitled Suck It Up, Buttercup, Be a Better I'm sorry, Suck It Up, Buttercup, Be a Leader People Will Follow. Welcome, Wendy. Nice to have
Well,
you.
it does mean be a better leader too.
I
Thank
apologize
you.
for fumbling over that.
That's okay.
And for this podcast, we try to keep it relatively short and to the point. And to that end, um, we ask our guests to come with a 6-word autobiography. And so, if you had to put your whole life's work into 6 words, what would that be?
I'm a no nonsense HR expert.
That works, especially with the contraction. So
Yep,
I like
yep.
it. You fit it in there.
Yeah,
Um,
I mean, first of all, thanks for letting me look at that ahead of time because I was like 6 words. Whoa, okay. But that was a good exercise to think about.
Yeah, people can go on and on, but if you try to really boil it down to just the basics, it takes a little work, but then you can really kind of get the essence of that message out
Yep.
there. A while back, you published a book called "Suck It Up, Buttercup: Be a Leader People Will Follow." Can you tell us a little bit more about who the Buttercup is that you're referring to, and what should they be sucking up?
Yeah, so absolutely. I think most people, when they say suck it up, buttercup, they're aiming it at the person who's complaining about something or asking for help or saying, I can't do this. But I actually aimed it at more at managers and so-called leaders to say, suck it up, buttercup yourself. Why don't you be a leader? People will follow, and then they don't have to suck it up. So there's so many, HR people, managers, leaders. I'll talk about that in a moment. My idea of leadership, that they think just the title is going to get people to follow them. And it's like, no, they might pretend they're following you, but that doesn't mean they actually trust you. And that doesn't mean they're doing what they say they're going to do, or that they're going to, follow you to the edge of the cliff because you're not really their leader. You're just on the org chart above them.
So this idea of leaders, it's a really interesting concept because that word can be really loaded. It can mean lots of different
Mhm.
things to lots of different people. And there's certainly leadership development programs, but for when I'm working with individual contributors, a lot of times this idea of leader is synonymous with positional authority,
Right,
and that doesn't have to be the case. But
right.
and it's easy for us to say that, right? It's easy for us to sit here and say, no, no, no. Leadership is really the ability for people to mobilize resources in order to achieve goals. So whether that's getting people on board, whatever it might be, it's easy for us to say that. But what advice might you have that can for people who are direct reports, um, so that they can actually maybe manage up a little bit and help their managers be better
Yeah.
leaders.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for asking that. I literally just got off of a webinar right before this, and then I was in an all-day training yesterday, and I was talking about the concept of leadership, and I'm like, listen, leadership is not a title. Some companies wrongly do that, like, oh, this is the leadership title or like a layer of the org chart, and all the employees just laugh at it. I know I did when I was in that position, and so that's why it's made it part of my world's work to say, anybody can be a leader. I don't care what your title is, where you're at in the org chart, lead from where you're at. And of course, you are going to have to manage up too, because wrong, right, or indifferent. Many people are put into leadership slash, management titles because they've been there the longest or whatever it might be. They have some relationship, and all the employees are rolling their eyes, going, "Yeah, there's no way. They're not a director. They're not a manager. They're certainly not a leader." But you can be a project leader if you're a project manager or you're a project employee. You could be a team leader. You could just be a peer to peer leader where people come to you and you're like, "Hey, I come to you with all my problems because you help solve them." That's leadership. Leadership is helping other people succeed, regardless of if you're succeeding or not. And so I firmly believe anybody can be a leader. You do not have to have a title to be a leader. And I do want people that are listening to, again, really think about the fact that if you have leadership written on your org chart, you might want to double check that, because some of your employees, especially if they're listening to this podcast, they're laughing at you.
Yeah, so let's stick with this for just a second because I want to talk about this. I've been in sessions around organizational culture. We've talked about leadership. Oh, this organization really values the idea that everybody can be a leader, and people will say, uh, that's I love that sentiment. Yet my leader really kind of flaunts their title, right? So
Yeah.
my leader says, I'm the decision maker. And while they pay lip service to the idea that everybody contributes, it's really, I don't feel like I'm heard. What
Yeah.
can somebody do to approach a person in positions of authority, um, in a way that's not going to jeopardize their job, in order to say, look, I'd like to contribute. I don't feel like I'm being heard.
Yeah. So, first of all, just going back to the concept of leadership, it's not for the weak, right? Leadership is not for the weak. And I write about that in Suck It Up, Buttercup, Be Leader, People Will Follow. It's my first chapter, actually, jumping right into it. If you, you know, people say you're a natural born leader, like, okay, that's personality styles. Everybody said I was a natural born leader. What they really meant was you're bossy. That doesn't mean that I deserve to be the leader because I'm bossy. And I had to learn, like, oh yeah, I'm bossy and people do what I want them to do. I learned a hard way. They might do what I want them to do, but that doesn't mean that they want to do it and that they want to work for me. So a lot of egg on my face where I finally say, okay, let's ask people what they want. And there's a lot of managing up in that, where you have to choose your words wisely and, maybe not call your manager an idiot or something like that, and say, "Hey, I have a problem I want to talk to you about." Or, "I see a problem and I have a proposed solution. Are you interested in talking to me?" So, regardless of what your role is, people want solutions. They don't want it shoved down their throat. They want solutions. And most people, whether they're managers or not, they want to be involved in that solution. Now, side note, some people want to take credit for it. If you're managing up and you know that, they're going to take credit for it, sometimes you have to suck it up and say, who cares? Let them take credit for it. It's going to change my team. My team all knows that we were all involved in this and that I got the solution pushed through, even though we're not getting credit for it. That's a different conversation that you may need to take to the higher ups and HR to say, hey, here's all my documented conversations with my managers. We actually made this decision and made these changes, not him or her, them. But regardless, it took me a long time to realize who cares who gets the credit. But most people do want the credit if they done something major, and they do deserve it. And so there's a lot of sucking it up going on in life.
Yeah, and that's that. I mean, I love that you kind of framed it in terms of sucking it up. Kind of goes both ways, right?
Yep.
And one of the things that my manager would remind me when I would get frustrated with my colleagues or other people, he would say, Brian, you're right, but are you being effective? And I
Right.
think that is one of those other things that, in terms of if you want to be a leader, even if you don't have the position of authority, that phrase is really important to keep in mind too. Now, you have kind of promoted one of my favorite concepts that gets promoted about your book is that it's not just something that you sit there and you read and think, oh, yeah, okay, that makes sense. But you actually have an acting lesson in your book.
Yes.
Can you tell us a little bit more about, kind of this practical activity that's in there?
Yeah, so I'm really big on understanding like personalities, personality types, personality, styles. And so in a lot of my in-person training, which I just did one yesterday in Orlando, I do training and I get people to stand up and say, okay, where are all your personalities? Because most companies can't afford like an official like personality assessment. I myself use DISC, which is a derivative of Myers-Briggs. So I like to get people involved because if you're doing something, you're going to remember it. And so the acting lesson that I have in it's the last chapter of my book. It's really about, adding a 15-minute daily recurring appointment with yourself or with somebody else, 15 to 20 minutes, for maybe 20 work days. Because if we do something, if we want to change something, we want to learn something, we want to learn a new personality style, which is what my acting lesson is. I say you have to, pretend you're a different personality style, that whole empathy thing. Put yourself into a different personality style for 15 minutes a day, but it has to be over a long period of time. Because if you only do it once, it goes in one ear and out the other, and you don't do it. It's kind of like teaching your kids how to do their homework or laundry or something like that. Like it's something that is practiced over and over and over again, and then it becomes norm, right? And
Yeah.
so that's what my acting lesson is about, wearing a new personality style, which is virtually impossible because we're always going to revert back to our own. But I'm like, just do it for 15 minutes a day. Now, I would encourage you, if you're a manager or a leader, whatever you want to call that, find out who is on your team and what their styles are. Even if you do an unofficial assessment, which you can do by reading one of my books. One I talk about personality styles, the other one I talk about personality traits like extrovert, introvert. But find out where are the people on my team, even if it's at a high level, and then let me pretend I'm them for 15 minutes a day and go, oh, now I know what it feels like to deal with me.
Yep.
Or
It,
something like that. Works at home too, folks.
that idea of just kind of flipping, putting yourself in somebody else's shoes, it's so powerful, and I think that a lot of people think it makes sense in concept, but actually practicing that can be such a powerful like experience, and
Yeah.
really open your eyes.
In my in-person training, I actually write out scripts and give it to people. And I'm like, I don't care what personality you are. Here's your script, and you have to pretend to be this person. And then they have to role play in front of everybody. And they're pretty funny scripts. So it gets hilarious. And you get people knocked off a little bit. You're like, oh, that wasn't very comfortable. I'm like, now you know how your employees feel.
Yeah, yes, exactly. Now you know, and now you can kind of feel it too, in kind of
Hmm.
a light way. I love that. Now I have you here, and we've been talking about kind of leadership development, and certainly your expertise is in the area of HR. And I've always found it fascinating that HR and L&D sometimes L&D is embedded within HR, but the two worlds don't often mix. And so
Right.
I'm wondering if you have some thoughts from where you, because our audience is a lot of learning and development professionals. So I love the fact that we have somebody who is really well known in the HR field. So what might L&D and HR do in an organization to better align and work better and more effectively together?
Well, the number one thing is, I do management training pretty much all day, every day, and I've put my HR experience into there because 9 out of 10 times when my phone's ringing now as an HR consultant or back then as an HR, executive or director or manager, it's usually like behavior that we're dealing with. HR though was started with law, it's compliance, but now it's changed into employee relations. And that means you need to give them learning and development opportunities. You need to teach people new skills. Sure, you've hired the best of the best on their resume. They have all the knowledge, skills, and abilities that you need, but then they have to interact with another human. And that alone is going to throw them completely off their game. So, I would say ask your people what their challenges are and then create learning and development opportunities for that. I literally just did that yesterday in a live training with people that I really didn't know. I was there at an association. There was probably like 20 people in 8 companies. And I'm like, what's your biggest challenge? And I already knew what the answer was because it's 2025 and it's attracting and retaining employees. I'm like, all right, well, then let's talk about, we're not here to talk about recruiting. I'll give you some tips. You can, watch some of my LMS itself over there on recruiting, but let's talk about retaining employees. We already got them, we've already trained them, we already, you know, hopefully we like them and we want them to stay long term. It's up to the managers to retain them. And that means that the managers need to be taught on the basics of HR law, what they can and cannot say, and then just employee engagement principles as a whole, budgets, what is our company culture? I am huge on company values and making sure that you put those company values into every single thing that you do as a manager, as a leader, as HR. Because again, most people are calling me because somebody's acting a fool, not because they're not doing their job. That's usually easy to figure out. Oh, they're not doing the task they were supposed to. We're going to put them on, we're going to give them feedback, put them on an improvement plan, and or remove them. When people are acting a fool and not being respectful, they usually go, what do we do? Remember those company values that are over there that are usually just on the marketing page for sales purposes? No, why don't we put them on the HR page and in the company policies and in the job descriptions? And why don't we teach everybody what that means and let them know we're serious? You have to be respectful here.
Yeah, what I'm hearing is almost HR is basically the subject matter expert of the organization. And the learning and development folks can help maybe bring that message in a learning sense to the organization. And the best organizations function when those two sets are kind of working in collaboration with one another.
Yeah, and then on top of that, HR, or if you don't have HR, it might be an ops person or the
Mhm.
just the managers, they're going to be the ones to be able to tell you, here are the challenges I have with my employees. You could look at, feedback forms, you could look at performance improvement plans, which half the time do not improve performance because people are just trying to get them out the door. That's a whole other conversation. But you can ask HR, HR-ish, but ask the managers. If you don't have the actual documents, ask the manager, what are your problems? Why are you struggling with retaining employees? Or why are people leaving? Or why are you making people leave? And then you could say, all right, now let's put learning and development into that aspect so that we can attract employees and then immediately start training them the way we want them to behave and act in our organization. But then on top of that, if they need a little bit more, improvement on their knowledge, skills, and abilities for the core of the job. So that's how they can work together. You have to communicate. I love committees. I love, love, love committees or task force, whatever you want to call them, of saying, let's get more minds in there. And for
Mhm.
whatever reason, we think, HR or managers or directors have all the answers. Usually the employees have the answers. Why don't we ask their opinion? It could be a survey, but then maybe after the survey, you say, okay, now we're going to have a focus group. Somebody that's been here 20 years, 2 months, 2 years, a manager, non-manager. Let's have a focus group and then let's actually listen to our employees who are willing to be on this focus group because they want to help the company improve. And then you transfer that into learning and development.
Wendy, I could nerd out with you for hours about this stuff. Unfortunately, people aren't going to listen to us just nerding out over this stuff for hours, and I know that you have other things that you need to do with your day. Thank you so much for joining us. Before we go, what is the best way for people to find you?
Yeah, so I'm a LinkedIn junkie. You could find me on LinkedIn all day, every day. Maybe not all day, but a lot. Wendy Sellers, the HR Lady, or you can go to my website, thehrlady.com.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Wendy, for giving us some time, sharing some of your pearls of wisdom from the HR perspective, and certainly from leadership development. Suck It Up, Buttercup is a perfect title for a book.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone else, for listening. If you found this helpful, please share a link to it on LinkedIn. I'm a LinkedIn junkie as well. And if you ever want to nerd out over anything that is training related, let's grab virtual coffee. And until next time, happy training, everyone.
Thank you for listening to the Train Like You Listen podcast. Brian and the team at Endurance Learning offer a range of products and services to support almost every learning and development need, including Train the Trainer workshops, custom e-learning development, and the award-winning training development platform, Soapbox. You can learn more about all of these and get a wealth of free resources at endurancelearning.com or by clicking the links in the show notes.